Welcome to the first in our second product leadership. Sorry, confusing there, throwing lots of numbers. The first episode of our second product leadership series. We're back with Merissa Silk. Had a really fun conversation last time. Merissa is head of product at Fundingport and is very good at product from our many conversations. So a good person to be learning from. How's it going, Merissa?
Yeah, it's going great. Very happy to be talking to you on this Friday.
Nearly the weekend over there. First question, let's jump straight in. So, customer insight is something we read about, you see a lot, right? Everyone throws buzzwords out there around speaking to customers, etc. When did you actually realize the importance of using customer insight in your product work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this kind of thing started for me in my career when I was working at the New York Daily News from 2012 to 2014. This newspaper, for those of you who aren't from the US, is like a highly recognized tabloid newspaper coming out of New York City. It's been around since like 1900, and they were quite well known at the turn of the century for innovating in photography space, actually like well ahead of their time. So when I joined there, they had a really vocal and engaged customer base, like across multiple generations, across multiple geographies, and so forth. And we were really lucky that our users across any platform were really happy to give us feedback. So it wasn't even the case that we were seeking customer feedback to use in our decision making, but we just had it. So when I arrived, our users were communicating. Our users were already communicating with us like quite vocally across things like commenting in news articles, across social media channels, across customer support channels that we had set up, and so forth. So anytime we had a user who had some trouble with any of our digital products, oftentimes they even got patched through to me via phone or email, and I would help solve their problem right on the fly as part of kind of an extended member of the customer support team. So we had this kind of frequent and consistent dialogue with our users without even having to do anything, which is a pretty amazing situation to be in.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting actually. And it's like you sort of organically, or the company just organically had these, feedback channels, right, set up probably by accident initially. How did you find, did you feel there was a lot of value in being on the phone, sort of talking people through issues they were having?
Yes, absolutely. We actually had a number of digital products at the Daily News when I joined, and then we launched a number over the 2 years that I was there. And it was really interesting because one of the first products I worked on besides the website was a newspaper replica app for a tablet. We worked with a really cool company in France in order to build this new product, and the demographic skewed significantly older and much older than anything I've worked on before or since. So it was largely people, like retirement age or older who, were avid readers of the print newspaper, and they wanted, to now use it on their tablet at home. And so it had this kind of like page turn kind of a feature to it, and it was really like a newspaper reading experience, but in a digital format. And what was interesting was, they didn't even really need so much help using our app, but they needed a lot of help using their tablet. And so a lot of the people that I talked to on the phone, also needed some help like using their device. It was really quite sweet.
Yeah, and I suppose, I imagine quite useful just to reinforce. I remember working on a website like 8 years ago that was like for over 60, isn't it? It's things that seem so obvious that are good to remember. It's like icons. People no idea what a search icon is. You have to write very clearly, like search location here. It's quite good practice actually.
And being able to sort of provide this extended customer support to this user group was a really excellent way for me to build empathy and know how to make good product decisions on their behalf, because obviously I was in my 20s at that time. I had different kinds of challenges, even from the usability side, but as far as comfort with technology. So it was a really good way for me to hear firsthand, what the kinds of trouble that they were having.
Yeah, I think also it reinforces something that I strongly believe and try to live by, which is that regardless of what product you're working on, you can still, part of your USP or any sort of your value proposition is like building really, really good relationships with customers. I think it'd be really easy in that context. They say, right, we're a newspaper with, X 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, whatever readers. We don't need to engage with them in any way, but it's, just one conversation like that, really showing empathy and support for someone, they're likely to talk about it, and you get that sort of natural virality of the product.
Yeah, it was a really nice counterpart, because the newspaper, especially in the digital products, we had like a wealth of analytics tools for product analytics implemented. I think in 2012, this was fairly forward thinking for the industry. So basically any digital tool that existed on the market that would allow us to track our users and understand how they were moving through our products, or, A/B test headlines and these kinds of things, like we had it set up, and we had probably, if you used, that Chrome extension in your browser, you would have seen like 30 trackers come up, but it was just because we were trying to understand user behavior. And we were really lucky, because on something like our website, we had like more than 20 million or 30 million unique visitors a month. So it was like an immense amount of data we were collecting on a regular basis. But of course, this data only tells you part. Sorry, I was just going to say that the data only tells you part of the story. So getting to talk to these users firsthand, like the combination of these two things was really meaningful.
Yeah, that's, lucky as well, right? That being a first role, having that kind of access to customer insight. How did you, because there's challenges with data, right? I think particularly looking at data and analytics of, is it accurate, and how do you actually act upon it? You've got 30 million users, how are you segmenting people, etc.? How are you actually turning that into good product decisions? What was what was a good aspect of the process there that you thought was really effective in terms of how you dealt with customer insight and that data?
Yeah, so especially the quantitative data was heavily used by the editorial side of the team. So while I was working there, actually, the Daily News launched a team that they called the digital editorial team. And this was like three people who were like data fanatics, and they were trying to use data in order to make all kinds of decisions on the content side of things. So this was a time also where somebody like BuzzFeed, for example, was really innovating in the space, trying to A/B test content, length of articles, headlines, leads, like all of these things. So they were using data, I don't know, every 7 minutes, probably, in order to make adjustments to optimize our content so that we would come up higher in Google search, and so that we would get more clicks and more traffic, because of course, this is how a free newspaper makes money online. In the case of our other products, like things like mobile website or tablet app or some of our mobile apps, I would say that we were probably using qualitative insights more, rather than using product analytics in such a, I don't know, really extensive kind of way. So in this case, we were listening to what our users were asking for, our readers were asking for, and trying to make sure that we could solve their needs in a really easy and fun and engaging way. Because ultimately, the products that we were building in the mobile team were just kind of a vehicle for the editorial content. So, the article or the story or the set of photos that we were presenting, these are front and center and core to the experience. And we were just trying to provide the best reading experience and best visual content that we could in a small format.
Yeah, so I touched upon some topics that I've been thinking about a lot recently, which is like this interplay between quantitative and qualitative, because it's, I think half of the problem, everything we do at Product MBA, we try to make sure that it's actionable and hands-on, right? People actually go and apply it. And I think touching it, for example, looking at a topic of data and analytics, how do you approach that? Because it's so easy to, you read the literature and, what Uber are doing, what Facebook are doing with data. And it's like, would they have firstly, the prerequisite of a culture, like a strong, robust ability to gather data, and also usually some sort of AI that helps like aggregate and inform decisions there. And I think there's a slight like fetishization of quantitative data currently in product, or has been really since Lean Startup, saying like, oh, let's just A/B test it, for example. So it's not, if you don't actually have these prerequisites, you're probably actually making like really ill-informed decisions. So topic I've been thinking about a lot is like the value of qualitative data. And, obviously that helps us tell like why something has happened. How do you think like realistically many PMs should approach broadly this topic of customer insight, right? The qualitative and the quantitative. Like, what would be your suggestion if you work in an organization without, great setup like Facebook or Airbnb, for example?
Yeah, so there's kind of two things that I can talk about here. So one is, if you're in like a really early stage company and you don't have that many users, quantitative data is kind of useless to you because you don't have enough traffic in order to make meaningful decisions from that data. So that's one thing. We were very lucky at the Daily News. We turned on a product and, we had like 20 million people watching. That's totally different, right? But in the case of bringing a new product to life, having product analytics is helpful, but it's not that helpful actually. And I think that if you're working in a more established business where you have lots of traffic, then the interplay of quant and qual data is really important, right? The quantitative data can tell you where there might be a problem, right? Like a leaky bucket, or someone gets stuck in a journey, or you're losing traffic, right? But you're never going to know why that's the case. And, especially if you're a more, junior or mid-level product person who's maybe just sort of getting your product instincts developed, you're going to have a really hard time making the right assumptions off of that data. And I've seen plenty of product managers only rely on quantitative data, and they basically fixed the wrong thing. They fixed a problem, but not the one that actually was causing the things that they were seeing in the data. And that's where qualitative insights come in, right? Because then you can talk to users and say, okay, I know this part of our journey has a problem, and now I'm going to find out what's going on, why that's happening, and come up with a solution that's actually the right one for our product. And in the case of a new product, qualitative insights are everything, all the way from early concepting to, even things like wireframes or journeys, card sorting. There's so many different techniques that I think are immensely valuable for a product person building a new product.
I couldn't agree more. You take a simple example, like say, our homepage. Right? So like we have tracking just to sort of see that something's happening, right? There's not 0 visits to the website, but there's no point saying like, or how, worrying about so much conversion from homepage visit to sign up, for example, because there are so many factors as well involved. So it's like, what was the journey before the person got there? Like we can't realistically track across every channel. And also like, what do you benchmark against? It doesn't really help to look at what other people are doing, because the context is so different. You've got no idea what the acquisition channels are like, for example. So you're just, you're as I find with, how Scrum is practiced, you're sort of just chasing after this metric, which probably doesn't make that much sense in the first place. And I think as you suggested, I think also you are missing out on like the big things. If you're with a microscope focusing on I don't know, your table, right? And you're missing that the house is on fire in the background. And I think, as you said, it's like this is exactly what I've been thinking about the last month or so. Is that there's so much value in speaking to people and just realizing what the 1 or 2 really important things are, rather than trying to optimize, one page in your funnel, which ultimately you're never going to come up with the good ideas, or the problem just simply doesn't matter unless you deeply understand like what is really important for them.
Yeah, it's really true. I think sometimes also you can become obsessive about trying to like convert leads, right? So you have your homepage and you bring someone through the different steps. They gain information about what your offering is, whether it's digital or non-digital, and then they hit the sign up button and maybe provide you with some contact details. That's only like the first step of a very, very long journey,
exactly.
actually, of like activating and converting that user. And I feel like there's an obsession on this front part, but actually what happens after they've signed up and landed in your product or landed in your service for the first time, that's actually like the most important part. Because it could be like that you have the best marketing website ever and you convert everyone, but your product, doesn't solve any customer needs. And so when someone comes in they don't know what to do first, second, third, fourth. They try it out for three seconds and then they're out and they never come back. And, this is really where something like qualitative insights, I think, can have a huge impact for a product manager as far as the decision-making process is concerned.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, I think it's such an important point that is not recognized. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background. That, you optimize for one part of the funnel and it can ultimately cause negative impact further down the funnel. Like, unless you have very robust data architecture and somebody that's able to oversee these different teams and make sure that goals or experiments aren't in conflict, which is very rare, then you've got no idea what the consequences really are. Like, as I say, we could optimize sign up conversion on the homepage by, could write like, we're going to give you a free, million euros if you sign up here, for example. Great, we're going to increase sign up, but we're probably going to get our overall conversion to sales down to zero. And I think, as I said, I'm not sure. It's something, just a topic, I've been thinking about is, I think for me, it comes down to this sort of belief of like, let's just A/B test, so let's just build an MVP. And it's like, well, unless you really understand the nuances of these tools, and they are tools and they're really effective tools, unless you understand the nuances and like the prerequisites of it. For example, okay, if you're going to do an MVP, like, you need to know what you're tracking, how you're going to track it. And you need to be willing to say, like, we are going to iterate this or simply scrap it moving forward, rather than just sort of building a thing and then it becomes the product. So I think for me, it's just about understand the tools, yes, but like really have an understanding of the nuances before you just throw buzzwords out there.
I mean, I think it's also a matter of experience, right? Because I think a pattern that I've observed, at least recently, is that, there's some group of people, whether they're business development or from sales or they're early to their product career or whatever, and to them, they just want to like make decisions. Oh, we can just make decisions on behalf of our users. We know what's best. This is fine. That's a way to do things. In some cases, if your time to market is really fast, then that's also an okay way to do things in the beginning. But then what happens is basically this introduction of data and insight sort of comes into this same group of people, and they're like, oh, we could collect real feedback. We could really learn and incorporate this into our decision making.
Yeah.
And then the next phase of this is like obsession, like let's test everything, and then like a total fear to make decisions without having tested it. This is bad all around. So I think there's like a really interesting part of a product manager's skill set that is a tough one to build around, like, when do I need data? Why do I need data? Can I make a decision without it? How much do I need to collect so that I can feel comfortable making a decision? And also, what kind of data is the one that's most useful to me in my product's journey right now? This is, not something you get from 2 years of experience. It's something you get.
Exactly. It's true. Yeah, it takes time. One thing I really like this way of the way I sort of see this at times is like there's this like effervescence in product. So it's like you get, exactly the teams that go, okay, like we're not using data, and then discover data. Oh my God, this is awesome. And then let's do everything data driven. And actually, I think there's always an interplay, right, between, and I think this is where many teams fail, is like a complete lack of strategies. There's no framework for actually like, how are we making decisions? So it's like, oh, we're A/B testing stuff and MVPing X, Y, Z, but there's no coherent direction that all of that is going in. Or it's just like, we're just going to listen to the users. And again, it's like, we're not digging down into the problem. And we're not also framing that within what are we trying to achieve as like an organization and as a product, like what is our strategy and what makes sense for the business. So I think it's really, it is something that I think just comes with experience, because on one side, people can be arrogant and just say like, I know what our customers want. Some point they fall flat on their face, and then they go, right, let's listen to customers at every step of the way. And it's very rare. I think only afterwards you sort of go to the middle and say, well, let's, use a bit of both depending on the context. I suppose final question, just making sure that we are passing on good tactics to people. Like if you are let's say in an organization that is not Facebook, Airbnb, Google, etc., like what would be maybe one or two specific tactics or routines that you would suggest product people integrate into their decision making that's low effort, high impact?
Yeah. So I think if imagine you have an existing product, you're a PM for an existing product, and maybe you did use data in order to build that product and maybe you didn't, it doesn't really matter. But one of the best ways to start to incorporate data or customer insights into your process is basically to run a day of testing. And this can be done actually with pretty limited effort, especially now with everyone working remotely. It's very easy to organize a day of research, and we recently did this at Funding Port. So it only took us a couple of weeks to get the whole thing together. And what you can do is organize a day of interviews. Maybe you talk to 5 people or 6 people and you ask them to use your product. You just watch them. You don't even have to prepare a lengthy interview script. Maybe you ask them about how they came to know your product, what they like about it, what they don't like about it if they're an existing user, and then ask them to take a set of actions, not so specific like usability testing, but hey, I'd like to watch you, work through this core flow inside our product, and we're just going to watch. I think that this is one of the most valuable things you can do as a first step, and get the entire team involved. So invite your business people, invite your executives, invite your developers and designers, everybody to watch and take turns observing. You can also record these sessions so that the team can play them back afterwards. And I can promise you that after one day of testing and watching real people interact with your product, the entire team is going to be convinced that this is a thing that should get incorporated into your regular processes. At least that's been my experience so far. And again, it doesn't have to be like a big effort. You can really organize something like this in only a few days.
Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion. It's something I've used before. I think first thing you do is just coming into a product team. It's like try and get the right people in the room, get user tests done, because it's very difficult to hide behind the fact that somebody's stuck and frustrated with with an existing flow. I mean, devil's advocate to that would obviously be that it's hard to get the right people in the room for that, because ultimately you could get designer on board, dev team, someone from sales, whatever, to sit in on those and understand the value, but you might pitch it to business leader or someone higher up who says, well, like, you've only spoken to 3 people, so they're just the wrong people, for example.
I mean, this is kind of the beauty of the remote setup, right? When you're running interviews in person, there's a lot of administrative overhead. You have to bring people in, you have to compensate them for their time and so forth. But running an interview online is easy. You don't even really have to compensate people that much, if at all, because it feels so seamless. They're really not going out of their way that much in order to help you. So all you really need is the buy-in of maybe your direct manager to say, hey, I'm going to spend a day testing and this person is going to help me. Is that okay? Because if you record the sessions, then everyone else in the team can watch them as they need to. And the truth is that there's something about diminishing returns with qualitative feedback, right? If you start to hear the same thing from 4 people, then you want to open your ears up, and once you hear it from 5 or 6, that's a pattern and something that's real and should be actioned afterwards.
Yeah,
you get diminishing returns after that point. So 3 probably isn't enough, fair enough. But once you get 4, 5, 6, this is plenty of people in order to make decisions off of.
Yeah, there's that famous like what they called Norman Nielsen report on usability of like, if you do 5 user interviews, you discover like 80 or 90% of the known issues. I think then also it's just like, if you want to get buy-in, just sharing snippets, for example, of that user interview, just like the points where there's maximum frustration shown is a good way just to start the conversation about being more customer led. But I think that's a great place to finish. So thanks so much, Merissa. Always a pleasure. Really, really interesting conversation. Anywhere we should send people? LinkedIn? I don't know, you're publishing on Medium. I was reading a few articles.
Yeah, so I'm happy for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. And these days I've joined the Clubhouse bandwagon. I've been on a handful of panels, so you can also follow me there.
Awesome. I'll post the links when we send out these talks. Thanks so much, Merissa, and have a good weekend as well.
Same to you. Thanks for having me.